now to the general elections. There was a drop in Nigeria's inflation rate on a month-on-month basis in December 2022. As we look forward to the January 2023 inflation report, let's get a sense of what to expect as election spending hits up. Join us now is Tosin Osunkoya, CEO, Commercial Partners Asset Management. Join us via Zoom. Great to have you. Good morning.
Good morning, Ladi. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. So let's throw it back a bit now. What has been the trend for inflation in different election cycles we've had in Nigeria?
Ladi, if you look at the election cycle between 2011, 2015, 2019, there hasn't been any empirical evidence with regards to how electioneering has caused or moved the needle when it comes to inflation. Inflation is primarily driven by, broadly speaking, by the food prices, the energy prices, and some other components. What has happened in previous cycles, you've seen inflation moderating between 10 and 11, and in some cases, maybe 12%. There was a particular election year in 2007, inflation was in single digits. So I really don't think that we're going to see much impact from electioneering this year impacting on inflation.
And also talking about inflation now, we know it's all about the Naira swap, swap at this time. But it looks like, at this time, Nigerians are finding it hard to get cash. Is this going to play into the inflation story that we're going to get for, say, January, February, and March?
No, I don't think so. I think what we're going to see as we move into February, obviously the January numbers haven't really come out. The January numbers, February numbers, and in the next few months, we will see moderation in inflation rate as a result of the base effects. What has happened with the cashless or the cash scarcity is due to the redesigning of the currency, right? The currency notes. I'm not sure that's going to impact on inflation. However, it's important for us to look at the month-on-month, variation or variance. What has happened between, November and December? Yes, in December we saw a moderation in inflation rates. I don't know why I keep saying interest rate.
Yeah, maybe because they're related.
Moderation in inflation rates from 21.4 to 21.3 is as a result of the base effect, and the base effect will continue to kick in up until the first and second quarter. I think what we should be mindful of is the fact that the prices of goods and services haven't really moderated. Yes, you could say the base effect, which is really in terms of mathematical, logic, right? But in terms of the price of goods and services in the market, we haven't really seen moderation in that space. And you can validate that by looking at the month-on-month. The month-on-month, for instance, in energy has been 1.7, increase compared between December and November. And I want to believe that that will continue in the subsequent months.
And we did get that big story yesterday with the court injunction restraining the president and the CBN governor from extending, the deadline for the swap. How do you see this? And do you see any negatives to the economy with this?
Ladi, I think clearly we will see negative, impacts as a result of the redesigning of, the currency notes. Yes, the CBN has genuine intention, right? But right now, the consequences, the unintended consequences that everybody is facing, particularly those that are very vulnerable, is very there. And you would agree with me. I mean, you've seen videos of, people in banking halls, fighting, just to get their monies out of the banking, vaults. And we need to be mindful of this hardship. So yes, according to section, 20 of CBN Act, that stipulates that the central bank is meant to give a reasonable timeline for the redesigning of the currency note. I don't think that the 3 months that they've given us, or 3 to 4 months they've given the public, is adequate.
Can we define reasonable? Can we define reasonable?
Ladi, I would think that, I mean, this has happened in countries, for instance, in India. I'm sure some of us have read about it. And we've seen the impact of, immediate or not given enough or adequate timeline for people to move their money away from from wherever they kept their money into the banking system. What I think they should have done is a gradual and systematic movement or a swap of this currency. But what has happened is not a gradual and systematic or steady swap. A 3-month window or a 4-month window, I think it's not enough. We're talking about a population of well over 200 million. We're talking about an informal sector. Most of those monies that the central bank had stated that they're outside of the banking sector, we're talking about 6 billion. Most of those monies are with the SMEs, those that are in the rural areas. And you need to cater for them. A lot of them are underbanked or underserved right now. They don't have a banking system. And you've said to them that you're giving them a window of 3 to 4 months for them to move their money away from wherever they topped their money into the banking system. You should have made provision for infrastructure for them to even, or logistic, for them to even move their money into the banking system. I don't think that that has been provided. Yes, the central bank's intention, in all honesty, I think that is laudable. The fact that it's at high time we started moving into a cashless society, moving 6 billion, which is 2.7 trillion naira, $6 billion outside of the banking into the banking system could potentially help or bode well for Nigeria in the long term. But in the short term, you must make provision for how that movement or the swap must be done in an orderly fashion. And I think that's where the problem is right now. And I think the timing is also very important. So if CBN is saying within the powers conferred on them, according to the provisions of Section 2 of 2007 CBN Act, they are doing everything within their powers because it is their responsibility for currency management, right? But there is also a stipulation that this must be done within an adequate time, a stipulated time, that will give room for people to do this without disruption of the economy. What has happened now is the economy is practically shutting down, Ladi, practically shutting down. And if we are not careful, this is going to impact our GDP in Q1 and maybe even in Q2. Because what has happened right now is the informal sector that largely contributes to the GDP, there's no business going on because people can't even settle for trades and services. The payment of exchange of goods and services in exchange for cash is not being done right now. Why? Because we don't have cash.
And one of the reasons, obviously, for this policy is to stop vote buying, as the elections approach. Do you think it's going to have any impact on that?
Yes, I think it's certainly going to have an impact on that. I don't know if the CBN's decision is politically driven, okay? But certainly it will have an impact on that. But again, don't forget that the politicians are also they have adaptive skills. If cash would not be provided, all right, for vote buying, I assume that they will look for non-cash ways of vote buying. There have been instances we've seen in the past, Ladi, I'm sure you've experienced where, provision of, food products is being given out as a way of compensating or votes, as a way of buying the votes of the public. So yes, in as much as this is going to limit the ability of the politicians or the capacity of the politicians to buy votes, which is a laudable idea, I think that the politicians will still bring the heart out of the, rabbit out of the heart.
And obviously, we know the CBN right now dealing with a lot, and obviously they still have inflation targets that they're trying to get to at some point. They've said that if inflation keeps going up, they will continue raising rates. So for the next, MPC meeting, what are you expecting? Do you see more aggressive rate hikes coupled with, electioneering and all that's going on at this time with getting cash? Well, how are you seeing that, driving the sentiment for the MPC?
I think, again, it's important for us to be mindful of the gap or the distance between when an announcement of NPR, increase in NPR or hiking rates has been made, and when the effects will kick in. Okay, so right now, I think that the central bank has done almost 600 points, from when they started hiking rate. The 600 points, effect of the 600 point, I think will start kicking in, or it has started kicking in. And I think that will continue into, the foreseeable future. I think that it's important for them to even reevaluate the impact of the rate hikes they've done in the last, few meetings they've had. I think that it's important for them to reassess that situation before they do another hike. Otherwise, the hike might actually be counterproductive. Again, I've said a number of times that when you do, when you come out to announce hike, it's important for you to appraise the impact of that hike. For instance, the hike that the central bank has done right now is to encourage savings, okay, and investment. I'm not sure that we're beginning to see the impact of that right now, because what has happened is you have the cost push inflation, coming into the system, as opposed to you trying to, discourage the demand pool. The demand pool is as a result of money in the hands of everybody trying to buy, goods and services. But as a result of, the surplus liquidity, you want to discourage people's consumption and encourage investment. But that hasn't really happened. In fact, what has happened now with the currency redesign is consumption would wane because people don't have cash to even buy goods and services. Savings would also come down because people don't even have cash to save. So there is going to be a complete disruption. So in the next few months, if we do not address the issue with the currency redesigning, there will be a problem. So you might not see the benefits of the hikes that the central bank has done in previous meetings. You might not see the effects of that coming into play.
How do you think international investors are seeing all of this, at this point, from, the extension, from the first deadline, that we have this injunction to not allow the CBN or the president, extend further? How do you think the international community is seeing this, and investors?
So, we've been talking and engaging with foreign investors, international communities, really. Obviously, they understand the peculiarity of the Nigerian economy. They also understand that there will certainly be a pushback because the effect of this currency design, trickles down to the common man on the streets, the vulnerable ones. They also understand that certainly central bank has to do something to ensure that, yes, a large chunk of funds outside of the banking system comes into the banking system. The truth about it is that in the medium to long term, we will begin to reap the benefits of this redesigning. If central banks successfully migrates those monies outside of the banking system into the banking system, your money supply is going to go. So that means that the banks would have money to lend out. If central bank, through moral suasion or through some other policy, propel or facilitate the banks to begin to lend, we will see more lending, and lending into the SME space, which is the foundation of every economy. So what would happen in the medium to long term is you begin to see growth in GDP because the banking system now has a lot more money to play around with. Now you have a digital and cashless economy. I'm talking about the medium to long term. You have a digital and cashless economy. That means that you could actually also track currency transactions being done within a particular economy. The federal government could also benefit from this because all transactions, at least for now, will be monitored. That means that the tax evaders, could be monitored. That means that there will be bigger penetration of tax administration in this country. And of course, the federal government has been looking for how to increase their tax revenue. So that could be another window for them to increase their tax revenue. Ladi, for me, there is a lot of benefits from this, but it has to be done systematically, gradually, and steadily. It cannot just be within a window of 3 to 4 months. That's where the problem is.
So people don't have maximum pain, even though we're getting those benefits. But we did get the inflation data, and we saw, month-to-month decline for the final quarter of 2022. And now the word disinflation is being thrown around, globally. What are you expecting? We're expecting January data that's about next week. What are you seeing?
Like I said before, I think the January data would see moderation in inflation rates, obviously because of the base effect. But the prices of goods and services will continue to soar. I don't think that would change. Okay, so we'll continue to enjoy the fact that inflation is moderating from 21% to maybe 20 and some 20 in previous months. But the base effect would wane at some point, and when that happens, reality will be dawned on us. I think that, and don't forget again, the fuel subsidy is a major factor in the basket. So H1, which is half year, we expect that yes, 3.3 trillion will be spent on fuel subsidy. But in H2, we expect that to be removed. If that is removed, that could bode well for Nigeria and could give us more moderation in inflation rate.
All right, I guess we'll leave it there now. Thank you so much, Mr. Tosin Osunkoya, CEO, Commercial Partners Asset Management. It was great having your perspective today. Thank you.
You're welcome, Ladi.
All right, so we're talking election spending there, what to expect for inflation data for January. But after the break, we'll head on to the commodities market. That's in a moment. Do stay with us. This is Business Morning.